Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and welcome to Season 5 of Call Your Hits. This is actually our 200th episode as well, which is pretty wild.
That's madness.
Yeah. We started this podcast sort of in the back half of 2020 as a bit of a COVID project. You know, we hadn't played Airsoft for quite a while, longer than we normally do, because COVID hit during winter, so we didn't get to roll into our regular season. And we've been stuck inside for months. And so it was a way for Pat and I to start getting together and spend some time together around Airsoft without actually being able to play Airsoft, you know?
Like hanging out for fun.
Yeah.
You know, just the how do we socially distance and talk about Airsoft stuff and nerd out and just sort of, reshape a friendship around that reality for a couple of months.
Yeah. And then, you know, when we were able to finally sort of be in person, but still in like small circles, because that's how it was, like we were in your basement recording these. And I know, you know, back then, I don't think we had any sort of concept of sort of how long we would be doing this for, or even really how far reaching it might become. Like we had the YouTube channel, obviously, but I didn't realize that we'd have people from all around the world listening. You know, we just kind of wanted to talk about Airsoft, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of a obviously there's all these really cool spaces we can throw this at and see if anyone likes it and anyone finds it interesting. But if you had told me that it would develop into like a community of people I talk to on the regular and, you know, be going 5 years later, I'm like, that seems improbable.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm glad, it's awesome. But definitely not an expectation. Like, you know, knowing people all around the world who play Airsoft who are like, yeah, this is right on. This is how we want to engage with it. Is awesome.
Yeah. And, you know, it was interesting from our standpoint because we didn't have any sort of specific goals or specific knowledge about doing a podcast. We just sort of had said, hey, why don't we have conversations about Airsoft and start, you know, sharing sort of our thoughts and opinions like we always have. You know, just our goal ultimately is to educate and maybe entertain, I guess, a little bit.
Hopefully.
But we just started doing it and learned that as we went. And now we're 5 years on. And I think what's really interesting is that in the intervening period, the way we play Airsoft, like in terms of how we play as a team and how we play in terms of the kit that we use, and then how we play Airsoft even as a community, has changed a lot, right? And I think our opinion, or at least my opinion, I don't want to speak for you here, but I think my opinion of what is fun, but also what works for Airsoft or doesn't work for Airsoft, has evolved over time through conversations that we've had on the Discord and even on the show with different people. I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is like we're both essentially fully HPA, and we started really from a standpoint of, well, LMGs and Airsoft are useless, to, well, that's actually one of your primary replicas now is an LMG. And like I think about the use case for it a lot, not to mention this 40 millimeter launcher journey that we're now on.
I mean, one of the cool things about it for me, I mean, one of the things that consistently keeps me like interested in Airsoft stuff is I'm a nerd, as everyone who's really like listened to this podcast for a while knows, about the tech aspects of it. And so going like, Pat, when we started doing Call Your Hits, definitely would not have been like, oh yeah, I'm going to be owning multiple HPA guns in a couple of years.
Yeah.
And really like initially, I think we can thank Steph for that particular cool idea. And I like both still. Like I'm still like, I'll absolutely rock an AEG. I'm just not going to build one. And it's mostly just once I had the regulators and stuff, the build costs not that dissimilar if I'm going to put all of the fancy things into either.
Yeah.
And I am. But like, yeah, I mean, we were talking the other day about, and, sort of like the idea of looking back at some of our really initial opinions about Airsoft stuff and maybe readdressing them, because 5 years is a long time. And like I've run a 203 before, And I definitely sold my 203. I'm like, it's on the t-shirt with my face on it. Like,
Yeah.
is the Mark 18 with the 203. I'm like, I wouldn't buy a Mark 18 again. Except that I just bought a Mark 18 again, right? Like the 416 shorty that I have is Mark 18 barrel length. I'm gonna put an extender on it so that's a 11-inch barrel, but or 10 and a half, sorry. But okay, so I guess I was wrong about that too. But the way HPA works, or like the ease of manipulating like muzzle velocity on HPA relative to on an AEG, means that I'm kind of interested in having multiple barrel lengths to try play around with.
And there's a saying that I always found is kind of trite, but is applicable in this context. The saying that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and I think a lot of times that's used as an impetus for someone to be like, just start. But really, actually, I've been thinking about that in the reverse context. I can say with absolute certainty that a journey of 1,000 miles does actually start with a single step. And I can tell that in reverse by looking back on the last 200 episodes and the last 5 years of Airsoft and everything. Like, we have done so much along this journey, so much like personal growth as a team, growth as the type of like community that we have fostered both locally as well as online. And what we do with Airsoft. But what I think is really interesting is I also don't know where this is ultimately going to take us, right? Like, I'm thrilled with what we've done, and in many ways it's just that's what we've always sort of just wanted to do, just sort of living in the moment without necessarily having a bigger strategy, although there obviously is a little bit of one. But it's just cool that this is how far we've come, and that to know that we're not done with that journey either, I think is really heartening.
It's very iterative, but like it's also one of these things that like I love playing Airsoft. I love playing Airsoft with my friends, especially with you. But this does keep me into it too. Like, especially like, right now I'm not playing Airsoft because it's winter. I'm like, the 40 millimeters do have me like a little bit tempted to go to an indoor game and just shoot 40 millimeters at people for a couple hours.
Legit though.
Like just bad people things. But like, that notwithstanding, I've sort of got that feeling of like, okay, so like we're looping around on some stuff, right? Like I had 40 millimeters and I was running at the time the little red Mad Bull Cheery CO2 ones, which were pretty good, but were a huge pain in the ass. Is the honest, like, why did I get rid of them? I was carrying the launcher. I was using them less and less, not because they weren't an effective tool, but because maintenance on them was annoying. And it was just sort of like, these don't do, like, to be honest, like the this is fun value kind of wore off. And without that, the practicum is not really there. But like where we're running scenario games now and we have access to, the Flamingo Custom Works launchables. Like, I don't really want to shoot someone with like a chalk round in a game, in a normal game. Well, I mean, little, but like
the right person.
Yeah, exactly, right. But like I don't want to smoke some random kid with one of those. I feel like that would be super uncomfortable for them. Like, so that's a no-go. Fair enough. But like, the idea of having game modes where like, especially in scenario play or like, longer games where it's like, oh yeah, this is what kills the Juggernaut.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like, where instead of using it for that, we're, like we're unlikely to get into, well, I mean, maybe in like a longer period, but in the next year, I don't see us getting into like having vehicles in our games particularly.
Yeah, certainly not as like, not like player owned vehicles or the vehicles that are part of the game. I have some ideas for vehicles, but not that you can shoot at.
Yeah, exactly. Way, right? Like vehicles that were willing to allow players to engage with anything.
Yeah.
And like part of that is just we live somewhere where stuff rusts out way quicker. Like there aren't a lot of 20-year-old trucks here, and the 20-year-old trucks that are here are either wildly unsafe to move from point A to point B, or are someone's like
they're workhorse, right? So But yeah, so it's interesting how everything that's old is new again in a way. But ultimately, this podcast is not old or new. I guess 5 years in. I mean, maybe in the podcast sphere, 5 years is a long time to be doing a podcast.
I actually really don't know.
Yeah, to be honest, either. I'm just like you said, we're glad to be doing it, and specifically, we're also glad for you guys being along for the ride. I know that many of you have listened to all of our episodes, and some of you, Matt, have listened to them multiple times. And so, a huge thank you for being here with us for this journey. And with that said, I think maybe we'll get into the meat of the episode.
Totally. Before we do, just also, man, thank you guys always for all the suggestions and the positivity.
Yeah.
The launchers are partly a me thing and partly you guys suggesting stuff, but the LMG was really started because I was like, this is a cool thing to talk about on the podcast, and I want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that has borne fruit and been even though it's been frustrating, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But just talking to people about gear, getting progressively bullied towards buying an M240.
That's happening.
But
yeah. So
into the meat of the episode.
Yes.
We love you guys. Thank you.
So I was thinking that in honor of this journey that we've been on, we would revisit one of our older topics from one of our very early episodes. And then later on in the episode, we're also going to talk about something that's brand new. So definitely stick around for that, because I think you, the listener, will be interested. So I wanted to talk about a topic from our second episode, which was where we talked about sort of typical airsoft players that you run into at almost every community, no matter where you are in the world. And what's interesting is that was very much an assumption that I made back then. But now, having played internationally and knowing an international group of players, I can absolutely say with 100% certainty, yes, these players exist just about everywhere. It's sort of the archetypal, airsofters. And so at the time, we had talked about a few different ones, and we won't rehash all of them, but there's some that are still very much front of mind. And we talked about the drill sergeant, we talked about the general, we talked about the Geardo, we talked about the lone wolf. I think those are still some pretty fun archetypes. And so I thought we could sort of come back to some of those for this portion, and then also add a few more, because in my experience in the last 5 years and talking to many people on the Discord, you may recognize some of yourselves in these new archetypes as well. And believe me, this is said with absolute love, and a little bit tongue-in-cheek, so don't take it personally. Also, in a return to form, Pat and I are recording in the same space. For those of you who are watching, you may have noticed we are crowded at the same little tiny desk. Which is kind of how we started so many years ago, except it was in his basement.
I was going to say, it's actually still significantly improved on the huddled around the Yeti mic with on my my futon. But it's definitely cool to sit down and do it like this. I think we should try to actually do this periodically.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of physically being
in your company. Well, and we have the space, so yeah. Right? So player archetypes, we had talked about, the drill sergeant. This is the player who's just shouting at everyone all the time. And I think when we had talked about initially, we had really talked about players who were cursing and swearing at other players to get stuff done, which not necessarily a vibe, probably not what you want to be doing.
It's not super effective. And I know when we talked about this in the past, we had seen people who felt that yelling profanity at their line of guys on their team to move up was effective.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's because they'd watched too much Generation Kill.
Yeah, definitely agree. Or Full Metal Jacket or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's not a very positive leadership style, and it's not a very effective one, Pat, who hasn't finished having his coffee yet when he shows up for Airsoft and is cranky, should not be trying to lead a group of guys.
Yes. But you're also not the yelly type most of the time. I think when I think about the drill sergeant now, I think less about, because we actually don't really see this in our community at all anymore, of players yelling profanity at other players to get them to do stuff. Sometimes people get into each other's grills. That happens very, very seldom. But most of the time, when I think about yelling people now, I think about Jeremy. Yeah, I think about guys who just yell and shout all the time.
And it's funny because I think that Jeremy fits the sort of like the mode of what I would think of as a drill sergeant airsoft player now, which means that in the last 5 years, we've sort of done a good job of, and I don't mean us, but like the community in town has done a good job of curating, either curating out in a couple of cases or just like getting people to think about their behavior in that sort of situation. Because like Jeremy yells all the time and he will absolutely yell at people to move up and do stuff. But like, as any of you who've ever watched any video of Jeremy yelling at people that we've put up, and we've definitely put some up on our YouTube channel, go check it out. It's hilarious. Like there's no malice in the way he yells at people.
Agree.
Like, you could not be more cheerfully being told to go like push up. And yeah, like leadership style matters. Personality management matters. So like, I probably was more negative when we recorded the first episode about this archetype of people because people were very rude.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of player I was thinking about in that context.
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
But like, yeah, I think, there's room to be that sort of like loud, like, I'm thinking of one of our guys, one of our friends, smoking a cigar and yelling and pointing in paratrooper kit, right? Like, that was Sergeant D. Like he was role playing sort of the Band of Brothers thing, to be honest. And like that was rad. There are ways to do it that are fun. You can be sort of like trying to operate as sort of like a squad leader, which is really what we're talking about here, and do so in, I think, a really fun way. And I love, frankly, that like we don't have players like yelling abuse.
Agree.
Like it wasn't a good vibe. It wasn't a thing we wanted around. But it's really cool to think like 5 years later, that's not really a thing.
Yeah,
some of it's also, I think, like our community. Like we have young players, but I think that like the 20-something airsofters and the like early 30s airsofters are a bit more mature than some people who were playing when we were playing 5 years ago.
Yeah, and who were like they're seniors as well, right? People who are older and less mature. But I wanted to add, having played now at Iron Horse when we were there, like we were surrounded by all kinds of different people. And what I thought was really,
yes, you'll have every variety of airsoft in there, just
for sure. But what I thought was really interesting is with the Storm Riders Legionnaires, like the Foreign Legionnaires, I should say, everyone was pretty level headed. There wasn't a whole lot of yelling. Well, actually, there was no yelling to get people to do stuff. There's no yelling on comms either, which was super great. But I definitely witnessed it from other squads that we were rolling with or nearby, where I just remember a couple situations it being in different buildings, and I'm just like, why are these people yelling right now? Like, this is not helping them get heard or understood, nor is it really helping anyone like drive any sort of urgency. It's just like, oh, that dude's yelling. I'm like, okay. As opposed to, when you're dealing with your own squad or whatever, and everyone's level headed and they're saying, hey, this is what we're doing now. You're like, okay, cool, no problem. As opposed to, rah, 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 it's like, I don't know what you want from me. I don't understand why. Like we were in the second story building with like, with Sam and Steve and a bunch of other people doing our last stand or whatever. And I could also hear the other players on the other team who were yelling and shouting. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, and they were shouting at us inside, which, okay, fine. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, why are we having this conversation right now? Like, it's not really. Is
this necessary or effective communication? And like, you'll absolutely hear us yell out during play at frontline, just being like, "Yep, people are over there." Right?
Yeah.
Movement left to right. Call it a marker on the table.
Yeah, and I do make a difference as well between like shouting and yelling.
Yeah.
Right? Like shouting because you need to be heard or whatever is not what I'm talking about here. I'm like, right?
I'm just clarifying because I'm like that. But yeah, like especially the like, rah, 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 like in your face, it's like, this isn't effective communication. Like,
yeah, exactly right.
Even if you think somehow that it's going to get people to do the stuff you want them to do, if you're like, no,
yeah,
come again.
The other thing that I definitely witnessed a lot of at Iron Horse, and I have continued to witness in our community as well, is the Geardo, right? And the Geardo, what we meant by that initially was the person, like, so there's two categories of Geardos, I think. Like, you have guys who are like obsessed about getting like their gear all finessed perfectly, getting the right gear, getting the right brand or whatever. Like guys like Jordan who spend a lot of time getting their kit exactly squared away is sort of one type of Geardo. But the one we had talked about initially was the guy who has just too much gear. The guy who's showing up, and I say guy here, and here I mean person, individual. I don't mean, just an individual
Airsoft.
player. Yeah. Just wanted to make that correction. The player who's showing up and they've got all this stuff on them, right? And it's not necessary. So, we see that with some of the guys on the Discord who are like showing up with their cast iron skillet and stuff. I'm like, bro, why?
I'm like, this isn't to like, yuck your yum. Like if you are doing that because like, no, I want this simulation aspect. Okay, cool, man.
Fill your boots.
Yeah, exactly, right. But if you're like, yeah, this is my Airsoft 3-day assault pack for our 3-hour game.
Yeah. And like the thing that I really witnessed at Iron Horse is that you had guys who, and again, here I mean players, you had players who were showing up with just so much stuff for every possible contingency, which I can understand. However, most of the time you're spending in the fob. So what that meant was you had to lug all of your gear from the parking lot wherever you were parked, which could be like 200, 300, 400 meters away from the actual entrance of the field. And then in our case, we had to go across the field to our fob and then drop it all there. And then at the end of the day, at midnight, you had to pack it all up, make it back to your car, and then leave, assuming you didn't leave earlier. And so all of that extra stuff, like if you didn't use it, that really was just creating pain for yourself at the end of the event, right?
Totally. And like it's one of these things where like I probably still overpack for a lot of frontline
You
games.
definitely do, yeah. But I'm not by much.
But like the the biggest piece there is probably like I'm bringing more replicas than I need to be most of the time. But like in fairness, that lets me switch between the LMG and the M27, and that's really fun. So who cares?
Yeah, I mean, I've shown up to frontline with the LOD M27 launcher, fired one single shot, and that's the only reason it came out with me. Yet I was lugging that piece of crap for like for all day.
I definitely I should buy a hydration bladder that will fit, like a little one that will fit in with my air tank. Because I carry like 2 or 3 of these onto the field. I don't carry them around with me. They hang out in the safe zone. But like I drink a lot of water.
But see, even that, I don't think that fits into the Geardo category because water is essential. You need to have it. And could you find a better way to carry it? Sure. But really, like I'm talking about players who are showing up, and it's like, are you realistically going to use this camp stove, this hunting blind? Are you really going to use like this, rain ghillie poncho situation?
I don't want to hate on people for showing up with like the hunting blinds. Like I get the train of thought, because I definitely was more this player when we played at Red Cliff. Like I was definitely more like, well, it's a 20-minute hike back to the car, so I'm gonna bring my house. And like the longer I played up there, the more it was like, nah. Right, like the less stuff I was taking was like, all right, gonna bring a backpack, need a backpack, BBs, gas, spare batteries, toilet paper. All right, we're good. Like, spare pair of socks because once you've been in Boy Scouts in Newfoundland and hiked through a bog and had wet, cold feet and gone, I have clean socks in my backpack.
You never do. Yeah, you never go back.
It's just like, oh, this is a good idea.
But yeah, that Geardo, like I've continued to see it like year over year locally, and then as I mentioned abroad. It's definitely one of the archetypes. If you play Airsoft, a player who just takes too much crap with them to the game, and if you are that player, maybe consider packing less stuff. I don't know, and again, it's not hate. There's no hate there, but like it's definitely an archetype that you would see.
There are local players who like bring 7 or 8 guns 2 or 3 hour skirmish, but they
Yeah.
actually like, and that on the one hand, it's like, that's a lot of guns. But on the other hand, they actually like, I know Josh has done that and run through all of them. Like, he's like, yeah, no, I want to run each of these today and I'm gonna, and had a blast doing it. So like,
Hmm.
if you're doing that and it doesn't suck, and like he's figured out a way to do it that um, makes it function mostly for him, great, aces, you know. But if you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go play a 3 hour airsoft event at a field, like I don't bring toilet paper to Frontline. They have a bathroom.
Yeah.
It's not a great bathroom, but it's a bathroom. I don't bring. Well, sometimes I do bring spare socks because they actually have a bit of swamp on their field, and cold wet feet suck. But like, um, I don't need to bring a camp stove,
Yeah.
right? Like, and
It's
like
true.
there were a couple of times when having like a camp stove at Redcliffe,
Was
like,
nice.
was yeah, like it's freezing. Let's have like a little cup of tea. Great, yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So like if you're playing out in the woods and it's a 30-minute hike in, and like you're bringing a few like sort of sensible creature comforts, sure.
But leave your cast iron skillet in the car. Come
Yeah,
on.
man. Like, I mean, if you want to carry your cast iron skillet and grill me some bacon in between rounds, like that's cool. But I'm not going to carry your shit because of it.
Yeah, legit.
And like the yeah I think this also like goes out to the people who are like, doing what I used to do with the Cyraz and just being like, all right, I've got an infinite amount of Molly, so like I'm going to carry a pair of binoculars and
Yeah.
it's like, we've said before, like I'm a big guy. I don't have too much trouble moving with like heavy kit on, but there's a point where it's just like, this is preposterous,
Yeah.
right? Um,
There's a new archetype that I wanted to talk about because this is one that we did see this before, definitely a bit less, definitely see it a lot more now. And that's the I made this at home guy, or the I made this at home player. So this is a player who has extremely custom kit, but it's definitely like slapdash or MacGyver together. I think one big thing that absolutely has changed since we started playing, since we started recording the podcast, 5 years ago, has been the advent of the quality, the availability, ubiquity, you could say, of 3D printing at home,
and like
right? And
of pretty good 3D
yes,
printing.
well, exactly. And it's opened up a whole new world of customization options for players, which is awesome. And we see this on the Discord a lot. Like players are, creating their own custom, unique setups, whether they're, chopping down their stoner kit or they're skeletonizing bodies, or, the 3D grenades that from Flamingo Custom Works are really great examples. And or even printing your own like mounts too. We've seen this before, like for optics, so that you can offset your optic from your PEC box or whatever. Like there's a lot of amazing things that you can do with 3D printing. And that's not really what we're talking about with the I made this at home guy.
And
I'm talking about someone who decided for whatever reason to homebrew a solution to something, regardless of whether or not the thing the thing that they wanted actually existed in the world. And their solution is, there's a term that we've used. I don't know if you use it in different sports. In scuba diving, they call it skookum. It's like very questionable in the execution. So like, instead of getting a commercially available HPA kit for your bolt action rifle, for example, you somehow kit bash your AEG HPA engine to fit in the bolt action, and then you drill a hole out of the back of the bolt to run the line so that the bolt can still move even though the line runs through it, like something like crazy like that.
One of my favorite thing, like uncategorically, about the fact that like the field is approved and like there seems to be buy-in locally about the flying flamingo, like, or they're not flying, but the flamingo noise grenades that are like $50, $40, means that I'm unlikely to ever have someone show up with like a Nerf grenade full of springs that they put in there that weren't supposed to be in there, full of BBs. That's like, and then throwing that at me and being like, "That's a grenade. You're out." And I'm like,
or the player who decided to make their own pyro and show up with it because it's totally safe and they tested it at home. Trust me. And I want to be very transparent. In my very early days of paintball, I actually tried to make my own pyro at home, my own smoke charges. No, I'm not going to tell you what I did. But it was totally a fire hazard.
It wasn't a good idea. We'll tell you that part for free.
Like I would never ever recommend that you do something like that unless you are indeed a pyrotechnician, like professional, in which case, absolutely. But this is literally your job. If you're like me and you're like, I read somewhere that you can do this by doing this other thing and be like, oh yeah, I'd be totally safe. No, right? Like it's not just about you, it's about, the other players on the field. But we see this, like this is an archetype. We've seen so many different players showing up over the years with just solutions, or like, oh, I didn't have a more powerful spring, so I cut rings off or coils off my spring instead of spending the $20 to just get a new one. Like,
and like a lot of this is, like like not in a negative way, but a lot of that comes down to like new players who don't want to listen to good advice about like kit, or who are like, well,
yeah,
I'm just going to do this, it'll work. Like from a tech point of view, it's frustrating. It's like, yeah, I cut down my spring. Okay, do you know what that does to a spring? No. And then 3 weeks later, it's like, hey, my gearbox is completely annihilated, and it's like,
yeah.
And like this is again, because someone's going to be like, oh, well, you can do it this way and it'll work. Yes, you knew lots of things, ways specifically that will work. But like the guy who's like, yeah, I just drilled an extra hole in my gearbox to lighten it up. It's like,
yeah. And like if you're already a professional, so like you can buy a barrel, for example, like an inner barrel that doesn't have any crowning. And if you have access to a machine shop, you can crown that barrel yourself. Yeah. Absolutely you can. But you have to know how to do that. You can't just be like, and we, I guess I'm not trying to say that you can't learn a new skill, because obviously that's rubbish. You absolutely can learn a new skill. However, we've seen many times over the years, people being like, I watched a video this one time and then I did it and now it's going to work. And I'm like, you really need to temper your expectations, because if you watch a video of someone crowning a barrel and then you go ahead and try and do that yourself for the first time, quite likely you're probably, unless you have some sort of previous machining experience, in which case fill your boots, you're probably not going to nail it the first time unless you get really, really lucky.
I'm like, it's one of those things where for a lot of this stuff, it's, I guess there's the three categories. There's the people who are doing custom stuff that's a good idea, which is 3D printing. I'm like, I'd even put crowning your own barrel in there if you don't mind the fact that you may expend a couple of barrels doing it, right? Practice on cheap, shitty ones. Not that I've done this. I don't have the tool set. I don't have the skill set. I don't have any of the knowledge required. But like,
just like anything, right? Just you got to practice.
And like, if you're doing it if you're going to try to do it to like a nice barrel, your gun probably came with an barrel that you can like chop off lengths of to figure out. But that falls to me like at the very edge of the middle of like, these are mostly good ideas. That would be better ideas if you had a more skilled application going in. I think like the people who frustrate me here are like, and again, I don't, if you throw a Nerf grenade at me and it hits next to me, I'll call myself out. Okay, sure. Like, but like, I'm not going to be excited about your like $20 or like $2 store bright orange plastic grenade that doesn't actually spread BBs around other than by opening and scattering them on the ground. And going, hey, oh, it's super cool. It's like, I guess. I guess. And the people who are making stuff that's dangerous for me are the ones who are like, it's like, I'm going to build my own HPA engine. Are you an engineer?
Yeah. Like if you don't have that experience, or like a very simple example is like you can get a nozzle to fit on an HPA tank so that you can fill a grenade. Like one of our usable like
you can tuck right? The top of the fill valve from my propane into the hose and sort of get it to put HPA into a 2 or 3 round.
But if you don't understand that the shell is rated for, I don't know, I'm just pick random numbers. Like your shell is rated for 300 psi and your tank is outputting 850 or 900 psi and it's not regulated. Well, you could be creating an explosion. Like you don't know, right? And so
I've seen
that's
people...
that could be potentially hazardous, right? Which is not quite what I'm talking about here, because generally like we want to try and avoid that kind of stuff. But like it's really those, like Pat was saying earlier, those guys who are coming up with some sort of like sketchy, like eyebrow raising kind of like, why would you do that? You can just get this other thing that fixes this problem.
So I built my own Claymore mine out of like a sandwich box.
Yeah.
Okay, will it work? I'm curious.
There's
Um,
also like a specific category of this, the I made it at home guy, which I want to call out in particular. When you're making something that's extremely bespoke, like let's say I'm just going to give a random example. Maybe one of you will recognize themselves in this, or maybe not. Decide to make your own Chicom rig out of a pair of jeans. Like, you know what?
right.
That's,
If you have the sewing skills to do that, I kind of love that.
yeah, I love that for you. Like, I
Like
think that's,
that is sort of like, um, we've come back all the way back around to fashion soft, but it's
yeah,
just a really specific subset of fashion soft.
yeah,
Um, you know, but yeah, like if you're doing stuff like that, that's really cool. Um, if you're doing like John has made Denison smocks and stuff, that's
yeah,
awesome, right? So like it's more a matter of like Phil has here in the notes. I made it at home. Trust me.
yeah.
And I feel like the yeah, we're doing science is the part where I'm like,
Yeah, trust me, it works. Trust me, it's safe. It's kind of like, okay, bro.
and
But
I put the people who are like, yeah, I took the stock off my gun and taped 3 batteries together on the stock
yeah,
around the buffer tube, which is a thing that happens. It's like, why'd you do that? It's like, oh, it was cheaper than buying a battery that fit in the buffer tube, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't even know where to start with telling you about this being a bad idea. Um, like those folks stress me out. Mostly because like I don't want to see a player run by on fire in the same way that's like, yeah, I made my own pyro.
yeah.
Please no.
Special shout out though to Zippy and Flub, who right now on the Discord are talking to us about the homemade night vision that they're working on.
I mean, that's to me the whole other spectrum. It's like, oh, it's
Although,
mad science. All right, cool.
well, it is mad science. Although Zippy's form factor of like how it was in a box or whatever is definitely more on the spectrum of like, okay, I get that this is a proof of concept, but holy moly, okay. But like just conceptually though, it's really really interesting, and I think there's absolutely nothing wrong. And I don't want anyone to get the idea that we're trying to suggest otherwise. Like there's nothing wrong with like customizing your kit or trying to get to a solution that fits exactly what you needed to do specifically. Um, but I think what we're really talking about is those people who there is a solution for what they're looking for. They just don't want to do that. They want to do the other thing because it's cheaper or easier, or supposedly cheaper or easier, as opposed to hey, with night vision in particular, night vision especially in Canada is like prohibitively expensive. So if you can come up with a solution that kind of works and is like $200, well then maybe it's worthwhile, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of those things where there's fun in the doing and the making of that, right? Like they're clearly enjoying that project.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, do it. If you get to the point where you're like, this is costing us a ton of money, or I hate it, stop. But also like they're relatively like the pyro one is the really like example is like,
Yeah,
don't burn down your house.
yeah,
Like,
seriously. I almost did, and I'm not keen to repeat that. Although that was like more than 20 years ago now, so whatever. The final archetype I just wanted to touch on it is sort of a new one that I've seen many times over especially the last 5 to 10 years, and is the I'm joining the military player. This is the person who is very keen on joining up and wants everyone to know that is their plan. I think I can count on. I think I need two hands at this point to count the number of players that I've bumped into over the last couple of years who want to do that. And to be clear, like that an Airsofter wants to join the military is not particularly surprising.
this is
right?
The Venn diagram between person who wants to play airsoft and person who will think about joining the army is pretty heavily overlapped.
Yeah. And like we have lots of players who are in the military who play airsoft, and in fact, our last event, we worked with the military specifically to use that for them as a sort of a recruiting tool to get more airsofters into the military, and vice versa. We want to get more military guys coming up playing airsoft, which is great. So that part isn't surprising, but every year there is at least one person in our community, sometimes multiple, who are overly excited about their chosen career path and decide to make it their entire personality. I think is the best way to put it.
And it's great that like I know people. I mean, I regularly have students who are like, yeah, I'm going to do forces stuff. It's like awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
If I play airsoft with you like 10 times in a year and I get told about your military career plans every time we play, I do start to be like, okay, like there's only one me. Like I'm a distinct individual.
Yeah.
Um, we've already had this chat, like, and it's sort of a like, yeah, okay, like, I'm, you're a grown ass adult. I'm not going to give you a pat on the head and a cookie for
Yeah, well,
picking
exactly.
for being excited to go to work. Like, I'm glad. I want, it's, you're way better off if you're doing something where you're excited to go to work.
Absolutely.
It's just like, is this the only, like, your airsoft and do you have other interests? Like,
Yeah, exactly right. And I think there's, players I remember, a few years ago, one person who was like really into like, no, I'm joining the Navy. Like I'm signing my papers later this month. I'm doing my, like I'm gonna go talk to the recruiter because I'm gonna do my, I don't know if they call it BMQ in the Navy, but like the basic training. I do think they call it BMQ. It's just
yeah, I
for
mean,
the
that part's
forces,
probably
yeah,
like,
right. It's like, oh, I'm doing this, and every time we're talking, it's like, oh, I'm going away to train in the fall, or this is why I chose the branch that I did. This is the boat I want to get posted on, and like this is what, and I'm like, cool, and like just constantly seeking my validation for this, and it's like Pat was just saying, like you are an adult. Like I'm glad, I'm absolutely chuffed that you have a career that you're very excited about, but like also, like don't care. Like it's good for you. Can we talk about the things that we want to talk about, right?
and like, I think practically also it's one of those things where, um, call me cynical at this point, but I've been playing airsoft for a while. Like, a lot of those folks are around for a season and say that a lot, and then aren't at airsoft, but also aren't in the forces the next
Yes.
season.
Yeah.
And like, again, like if you're like, yeah, I really want to do this, and then you're like, okay, maybe not. I mean, people like, that is the experience of being a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, right?
It's like that
I don't
expression.
remember, I'm old, but
Well, it's like that expression, like everyone wants to be a SEAL, no one wants to do the push-ups, right? It's like you want to be able to say, "This is what I'm going to do." Cool, okay, excellent for you, but then you actually have to follow through on that at some point,
yeah,
and get through it. Yeah,
like, I mean, I still am in touch with a bunch of people who I did education with in 2012 who, aren't teachers. Like, more of the class that I did education with aren't teachers than are.
mm-hmm.
And like, it's a tough job to get work in here. It's a tough job. Bottom line. It's very validating. It has a lot of value, but like, a lot of them took the skills from the degree and went and did other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some of those were people who were like, yeah, I've always wanted to be a teacher, and they just didn't. And there's no foul there. Like, oh, I really want to be a teacher. Oh, actually, I don't. Okay, fair enough. Oh, I really want to do the forces stuff. Get to BMQ. Jesus, this is terrible. I'm out. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, no foul. I think making anything your whole personality, for me, is just sort of like, oh, dude.
And especially I find with the forces, what's really interesting is, because, well, we have Cal on the team, but like I know so many people in my life who have made the military their career. I mean, my brother-in-law, my father-in-law, that was their entire career. One of my former leaders at work, that was their career before they moved into the role that they're in now. So I've spoken, and I've ET, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, or like Josh's dad, who was in the forces, and like spoken to so many people now about careers in the military. And obviously, just like any job where they're trying to recruit people, it's a recruiting job. They're selling you on a particular job, and the reality of that job is going to be different than what you think it is. And so when I see a lot of this like over the top enthusiasm about it, maybe this is the cynical part of me sort of being like, I really wish you would temper your expectations, because this is not to say that this is not a great job. Obviously, it absolutely can be, because ET did his whole career in the military. My brother-in-law, my father-in-law did their whole careers in the military, and they loved what they did. But I can almost guarantee you that it is not what that they thought initially it would be.
Well, I'm like,
which is fine, right?
I mean, there was a point where I know you thought about it actively.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
There wasn't really for me, because I got to the point where I might have thought about it actively and was like, oh, I have colitis. Well,
yeah.
But like, part of it for us is definitely, and I'm not, like, you can call it cynicism, or you can call it just the fact that we have a whole bunch of insider views, like, in our lives talking to us about it, that, we know the upsides.
Yeah.
There are upsides visibly, right? But we also know that there are a bunch of parts of it that aren't super fun.
Yeah.
And
Just like any job.
yeah, I mean, there are. I don't ever have a day where I'm a teacher and I don't like my job. But I have definitely had days where I went home from being a teacher and was like, Jesus, like today was a lot. But for me, like the fact that I walk into work with a smile on my face most mornings is extraordinarily, high value. Well, I am someone who will talk about their job too much and loves their job too much. And I still have days where I'm like, I want to go home.
So you're I'm a teacher archetype. Just like I'm a runner. I'm a runner is the archetype that I fall into, right? Oversharing on all that kind of stuff. And again, like this is all like tongue in cheek. Like obviously, like we're so thrilled. Like when people are excited about stuff, like we're thrilled to hear about it. Just at some point, you're like, okay, bro, we got to talk about something else, right?
Yeah, like this is not meant negatively at all, right?
So speaking of talking about something else. If you've stuck with this episode this far, thank you, firstly, for sticking with it. We wanted to end this episode talking about a bit of a journey that we're embarking in 2025. And we want to invite you, specifically the listener, to join us in a way. So we've talked a lot in previous seasons, at this time of year. This is the time of year that people are making New Year's resolutions, right? And we've talked about how more often than not, we don't really like them, right?
I dislike them, not like in I'm in New Year's resolution, just in a personal, like I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Because I know it doesn't motivate me. It doesn't get me to do the thing. So what's the point in wasting brain time on it?
Yeah. So what we've done in the past, I mean, if you go back to our episodes, we talked about setting sort of specific goals that we want for the year. Like what do we want to accomplish throughout the year, but in a more like reasonable and smaller scale. So we talked about, like we're going to try and play X number of times, right?
And like that works a lot better for me.
Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, it's the idea of breaking down the year into smaller chunks, makes it more manageable. If you fall off the wagon, you don't, you're not, screwed for the rest of the year or whatever. Like if your goal is I'm going to run every single day. Well, the first time you fail that, then you failed for the whole year, which is not motivating. And really, we wanted to look for something a bit different, that instead of saying like, this is the big lifestyle change I'm going to make, or this is how I'm going to change how I play or whatever. This is an idea that came from a conversation that we were talking about, actually with my wife, but also inspired by the Airsoft Challenge program. So the idea is to create a Airsoft Bingo card for ourselves individually, right? And so the idea is you take a blank bingo card, so it's 25 squares, right? Except, 24 because the middle square is free, right? And then you fill those squares with Airsoft-related things that you can cross off throughout the year. And they can be as hard or as easy as you like. They can be big things. They can be small things. Basically, anything that you think you can do, anything that you think might be a little bit of a stretch, that might be something that is fun for you for the year. And then as you go and do those things throughout the year, you can just sort of cross them off your bingo card.
Get your little hit of dopamine. And like make, I mean, for both of ours, I haven't seen Phil's, but like I know a bunch of them are just like chill, silly, fun things as well. Like, some of them are sensible. Other ones are jokes at my own expense about this. You guys will see when we talk about them.
Yeah.
And like we're gonna, I assume, share them on the Discord and the social media.
Yes, we absolutely do. Yeah.
Finalized. We're still. I've got 4 squares left that I'm like, what can I do with this?
Yeah. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna post up. I mean, you can find a blank bingo template for yourself, but we will share one on the Discord. We're gonna create a new channel on the Discord as well, for you to share your filled out bingo card and then share updates on the things that you wanted to do in the bingo cards. And then throughout the end of the year, as people are completing their bingo card, we might do a little bit of like prize support where we send you a little something for completing your card, but we'll figure that out as we go along.
Just fun stuff, right?
Yeah, but the whole idea is to motivate ourselves to strive towards certain things with respect to Airsoft throughout the year, and to give you something fun to look forward to. So we're going to share a couple of examples from our bingo, our respective bingo cards. Just with you, like through this conversation. Obviously, we're not going to read 24 things and
Yeah.
24 things from each of us, but just to give you like a flavor of the kind of things that we are looking to do throughout the year. The other thing that I will encourage you to think about as you're looking at your goal is set progressive goals for yourself, which is to say, not progressive goals, but progressive bingo cards. So you could have like a square that is like, I want to get 10 kills in one match. And then you can set another one that's like, I want to get 20 kills in one match, for example, right? Something like that. So you can do one and then you can do the other, because that way as well, as I mentioned, if you say, well, I want to run every day, the first time you don't do that, you don't achieve it. Whereas if you set some progressive ones too, well, then you can do that. It's like, once you get that, great. You still have another thing that you can strive towards.
Yeah. So like, one of mine is do 101 ready ups because I find the number entertaining. One of them is do 1,000 ready ups.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying like, oh yeah, do 10 ready ups a day. I've set that as a goal before and it was a bad idea. Just because the first day that I was like, I don't have time to do that, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Whereas, going, oh yeah, like do 100. I will check that off in the first couple of months of this year.
Yeah.
Do 1,000 probably take me a little longer.
Yeah, and so I've got stuff on mine where I'm working on a more milsim kit, a more low speed kit. So one of my things that I want to do this year is I want to wear that to like a regular skirmish, which is not the place really to be wearing that kit. But I want to do that because I think it would be a good test of the kit, but I think it would be challenging in a different way.
Well, it's a good way to like test the kit, like stress test the kit, and a good way to stress test you while you're wearing the kit without it being like, because I mean, if you're doing that, my assumption is that you're doing this because you want to have a more milsim-y, like longer game kit for going to one or running them or playing them. And like, yeah, that's a great thing to run. Like, just that's a great thing to set up to do with your airsoft gear on a I can do this. It's an achievable objective. It's fun kind of basis.
Another one that I have on there is buy a new replica. I actually don't think I've ever bought a brand new replica. I've always ever gotten it from somebody else. So one of the things I would like to try and do this year is, buy a gun from a store. Buy a replica from a store. I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's on my bingo card, and we'll see if I get the.
It's bad that you said that, and I already have ideas.
Yeah, it's not a 240 Bravo. I'll tell you that much for free.
Yeah, I mean, the weirdest thing about that is that I've been looking at them, and they don't weigh a ton more than the 249 does. Which is sort of like they're going to be, I assume, much more front heavy, but yeah. I can't believe I'm even considering this madness, but I am. So here we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got some stuff on mine that's serious, like, to do the ready ups. I've got some funny stuff. So I have an escalating set of goals with 203s because I'm going to try to make sure I use them. One of the things that I really like about, or I'm excited about with the 203s this year is, we have in the mail, some 203s that load much more easily than the ones I used to use. Like they're like a 60-second reload instead of a 2-minute reload in between games. So, I think I'll be a little more willing to be aggressive about just firing them off for the fun of it.
Yeah.
So I have Tag John with my 203 as my baseline goal there because shooting John with silly things is just fun. Sorry, John. I have, get 6 kills with 1 or 3 and 6. I feel like based on my previous usage, like 6 kills would be with my 203 specifically would be a pretty good season for the 203.
Yeah, I think so too.
And that's not like a super serious objective. Like if I get to the end of the season, I'm like, oh, I got 4, I'm still going to be chuffed. Yeah. If I get to the end of the season, I'm like, I only shot John with this and then used it for scenario stuff. Also rad. I might rethink how often I'm carrying it if I'm only using it like once. Although one of the things that I did realize, the only game this season that I got to game with the 203 on the M27 is that it actually gives me a close range thing that I can cycle to when I'm running the M27 on a DMR mode. So it actually has that sort of like, oh yeah, I mean, I only have 1 shot, but it's a pretty decent shot of deterring people from coming close to me.
That's true, yeah.
I have go away button.
Yeah. I have some 2 or 3 stuff on there as well because I want to make sure that I use it. But one I think probably the flagship one for me is play airsoft outside of Newfoundland. I think that's something that we did last year and that I absolutely want to repeat with that again this year. If it's either playing airsoft somewhere in Europe, perhaps in July of this year, or if that's not going to happen, then going back to the United States or perhaps somewhere else in Canada, depending on what the games are organized. Have some tentative plans in the works for that. There's a Operation Red Road, which is actually with the Flamingo guys. That's in Ontario, which would be pretty cool. And then there's another one in the States that we're also thinking about going to as a team. So we'll see what the timing looks like, but that's one of my flagship ones for the year. That's the big one. If I'm able to do that, I will have had a pretty solid year.
So, like, talking about my like more season objective, more serious ones, playing up with the saw, running like fully with the box mag and everything, seems like a thing that will be super fun to do. I really want to do that. Forgive me, I'm just getting over a cold. I have one of the boxes there that's work on my fitness, brackets successfully. And like that probably is actually a New Year's resolution. But one of my really good friends, her brother-in-law is a sports fitness guy, and he's used to dealing with like injuries and stuff, and working people up from like scratch.
Yeah.
I'm back to doing fencing once a week. The shoulder will do that, so it's gonna and I'm gonna look into like getting a membership at his gym or like getting coaching from him. I'm not sure how that will work specifically, because like I don't know what the structure of their organization is. But like I'm gonna get into that just because I am not as strong as I want to be, and like a lot of it really is trepidation about having like torn on my shoulder, and I'm just like, you know what, I can pay someone to help me with that so that I don't tear myself up.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And that seems like a pretty good idea, so I'm gonna.
Yeah. So like whether your goals are small or your bingo cards are small stuff, big stuff, doesn't really matter. The whole intent for you is to think about what kind of airsoft season do you want to have? What are some of the things that you want to achieve? What are some of the things that you think might keep you motivated? Some squares that you really want to be able to check off your bingo card throughout the year. And there is no right or wrong answer. It's all about what you want to do. And obviously, like, this is all self-policed. Like, you can put stuff on there, and if you want to cheat and say, oh yeah, I definitely did that, but you didn't, well, I mean, you're only really cheating yourself. Like, I mean, it's just like anything else with airsoft. It's it's honor-based. But hopefully by creating this bingo, this Storm Riders bingo, Airsoft bingo, that will help motivate you to do a couple of new things maybe throughout the year. You'll be able to hold each other accountable on the Discord as well, and celebrate your wins. More importantly than anything, I think the whole idea behind this is to be able to, like Pat was saying, get that dopamine hit and feel good about actually accomplishing something that you wanted to accomplish that year, whether it's big or small, right? Or somewhere in between.
Like, one of mine is just take all the pouches off my kit and figure out where I want everything in, because there's some stuff there that I'm like, oh, literally I have 2 seasons now. I've been like, I should tinker with that.
Yeah.
And it's just, find the motivation to make small improvements. And
it can be airsoft adjacent as well. Like, one of the things on my list is to organize a team social event, right? That's not something we really did a whole lot of last year. I mean, Cal got married, so that was kind of a social event, but like not really. And then my birthday party was kind of social, but like that's not really the vibe.
We went out to dinner there with Kirby, but like again, that wasn't really like the thing. And like we all like doing that, and it's good to have it on these because it's basically like, for me, a lot of this is like reminders to do stuff that I should and want to do.
Yeah.
So that when I'm like, man, I have an hour to kill or 20 minutes to kill for something airsoft related, like, cool.
Yeah. So we'll post that. We'll post a blank bingo card for you to check out in the bingo channel on the Discord, which at time of recording doesn't exist yet, but you will see it by the time you hear this. And hopefully you will join us. Hopefully several of you will take up the mantle and join us. It's not too late if you listen to this in February and you want to join. It's not too late. Just join. Who cares? You just have fewer months to do the thing, so you'll just have to try and cram more into there.
Be a little gentler to yourself on like selection, maybe. But yeah.
So that's it, guys, for this episode. Hopefully you found this entertaining. Hopefully you decide to join us for this challenge. We're so thrilled for you all to be here with us 200 episodes later. And we don't have any intent on stopping. So you can expect to hear from us again next week talking about something else that's Airsoft related or Airsoft adjacent. But until then, that's all we've got for you this week. Thank you so much for listening, guys.
Thanks for making this an awesome experience for us. And yeah, we'll keep doing it.
Take care, everyone.
Happy New Year.